before we move on to the next deal, you were talking about what it means in terms of going forward with the Buddy Hield piece because of the J.J. Redick kind of offense you can run with the two-man game, some of the other stuff with Tyrese Maxey. We really didn't mention him and how it fits him as well. So what were you looking at when you talk about what other things, as we talk about the gravity and all that stuff with him, what were you looking at when it turns about right now and, of course, for the future if and when Embiid does come back?
Well, I'd like to get your guys' take on this, right? Like we've kind of been over what the fit is with Buddy, and I think it's pretty simple. We'll see if it works, to what degree it works. I think it'll certainly help. Like they have not played NBA offense over the past week. It's been a really rough watch. But what I am interested about is kind of the path that Daryl Morey took here, where you have a team right now that I get that they're banged up and really sick. They stink, man.
They are like somebody said, process level bad. I don't know that I would go quite that far, but a few more games of it, and I'm probably right in that boat with you guys.
So the fact that we're even discussing process level bad, though, you have a team that, if Joel is back this year, has a goal, and that is to just tread water as much as possible. And I think, for me, initially I was like, all right, can they stay in that top 6?
Yeah.
For me, I have lowered the bar because of these past 3 games. I know it's a little bit prisoner of the moment, but guess what? When you watch that slop, I think I do have to change it a little bit. I think it turns into, can you stay in the top 8 and get a chance at that first play-in game?
I think certainly they can. And stay in the top 6, I think I looked at it today. They need to go about 14-16 over the last 30 games. You get Batum back, you get Marlton back, you throw in Hield.
14-16, that's a lot.
Look, it's a lot. It's not going to be easy, but you get those 3 players back into the rotation. I think they have a chance. Not a great chance, but I think going 14-16 pretty much locks you in the top 6, and I think it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, so that's just all a preface to say, because I know Kyle talked about this the other night, and I think some fans probably wonder this too. Is it worth buying with this team, right? Mm-hmm. And I truthfully don't know the right answer, but I think the counter argument is, all right, even if you get Joel back, he comes back in late March, early April, and it's like, is he 100%? Like, is he ready to go?
Yeah.
And how far do you fall? Is it worth it to try and take a swing this year? And that's kind of the counter argument, right? Could you have moved off of some of these expiring contracts, the Tobiases, maybe the Marltons, people like that? I think that is generally the counter argument, and what people wonder, because maybe if you do that, maybe you add, a few more picks. As Kyle said, first-round picks are not being swapped here, but you add more ammo to go into the offseason. This offseason, that Daryl Morey seems to think cap space is going to be a big deal for him.
Yeah. Either cap space or the 5 first-round picks that they'll have to trade.
Exactly.
I do think, like I wrote earlier today, my gut was he was going to try to make smaller moves, keeping as many, if not all, of the first-round picks and the cap space. And I think that's how it's going to ultimately play out. And the question becomes, all right, did they add enough where they can keep a top 6 and get Embiid back and give him a chance? I think there's a chance. I think it's a reasonable split-the-difference kind of move, but there's risk either way. The risk is that they don't keep a top 6, Embiid doesn't come back healthy, and nobody requests a trade or is available in a free agency that's really worth all of this hassle. There's risk on both sides for sure. It's not a slam dunk either way, but in terms of splitting the difference, trying to improve your team just enough now while also keeping the assets, because the summer is always when the Sixers had a bigger chance to get some, because I just feel like Daryl views the assets they have, the trade assets they have, and the cap flexibility as his last chance to get a long-term significant piece around Embiid and Maxey. So to trade that away for not a Bogdanovich, like a Atlanta Bogdanovich or something like that, it just didn't feel like he was going to give up multiple first-round picks to do that. I think this is a pretty reasonable split of the difference, but there is still risk.
Yeah, and look, to that point, Derek, on Bogdanovich, reported yesterday, they were calling on guys like that, right?
Yeah.
Like they called on Bogdanovich, and they, according to Woj, I was not as privy on the Detroit stuff as he was, or on many other things for that matter. But he reported late last night that talks had broken down between the Sixers and the Pistons for basically what the Knicks ended up trading for. Yeah. It was a version of that trade. They didn't have a Quentin Grimes. They couldn't make the deal. So they're sniffing around there. They were certainly looking into Atlanta Bogdanovich, but the message that's been sent there from Atlanta is, look, we have him under contract until 25-26 and have a team option on him for 26-27 that's for like $16 million. I would find it hard to believe Bogdanovich is not going to be worth $16 million to a team in 26-27.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be a good deal under basically any version of the future salary cap. And then they're also talking to a team like Portland, seeing, hey, what is Malcolm Brogdon going for? And that, to me, was one of the more interesting ones, right? If we're talking about the cap space plan and all the potential permutations of what can happen there, Brogdon was someone who would have compromised this year's cap space, but you're then essentially rolling it over to the next year. It's like, okay, after next season, you would have had, what is it, 22, 23 million coming off of the books, and probably a stronger free agent class, all that. Instead, they decided to, hey, we're not going to give up first or multiple firsts as the key here. Like, that's what Portland wanted. That's what Atlanta wanted. And the Sixers are not willing to overpay for role players. Like, you can kill Daryl Morey and say he's a star hunter and you can still make upgrades, all that. I can understand that logic. But then you have to be willing to say, okay, well, then I would have traded multiple firsts for a guy, because if you're not getting anybody beyond the tier we're talking about. Alex Caruso, the Bulls didn't want to trade him. They're asking for multiple first-round picks. So you can't, it's a stupid. The Bogdanovich trade that Detroit made, actually, I said on Twitter, great example of why the Bulls should be selling Caruso now for whatever the top of the market is. Because Caruso next offseason, or next trade deadline, he could go for, 4 or 5 seconds, and that's it. Where you could probably get a real first and maybe a young player for him right now. You should sign on the dotted line and get it done. So Buddy Hield represents a rational middle ground in there, helps you real time. And to the point the initial point we're talking about here with fit with Maxey, all that, the way I phrased it in what I wrote today was that this essentially gives you that DHO movement shooting off of Joel for 48 entire minutes. Now, Joe's not going to play 48 minutes, not even in the playoffs, but Maxey's on the floor, you got that. Plus, you got the pick and roll, plus you got everything else. Maxey has to sit, and you play, could be campaign. I think it's going to be Kyle Lowry eventually in that backup guard spot. You still have Buddy Hield to come in off the bench as that DHO movement shooter, two-man game guy with Joel. So the thing that has given Joel success for basically his entire career with JJ and Seth and Tyrese, you now have that in a bench guy on top of having that with your second best player. So I think offensively it's gangbusters.
We all silly like the mayor.